So my husband Phil and I have a consulting firm that is located in Casanova, New York. We kind of split our time between New York and Florida. Most of our clients at this point are probably in South Florida, but I would consider New York more of our home base, and certainly now doing work virtually like everybody else. And our firm is founded on major gifts. And so the implementation of major gift programs and planning for and running campaigns, running feasibility studies, helping people with the strategic visioning process, anything that can be a natural extension of major gift work is what we do. Sue Leahy, who I believe is on the board for AFP, or is that her married name? I can't even remember. Anyway, she had reached out to me a couple of months ago and said that it would be helpful to do some kind of conversation around asks at the end of the year, which is something that we certainly focus a lot of our time on. And so I'll share things tonight, and I'll also share some resources that can be shared with anyone who didn't come to this as well too. So Ashley, do you want to ask me questions, or do you want me to just talk? What's the best way to share information?
I'm thinking, why don't you just kind of go ahead with whatever you have planned, and then we'll just kind of keep it super informal, and if we have questions, we can kind of jump in and have a conversation.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and normally I work with, like I mentioned, my husband Phil, but for some of these kinds of engagements, we've had to divide and conquer a little bit, and it's very busy in our home life as well. So that is why you're getting me solo. So oftentimes it's easier for us to play off of each other's ideas. But in this case, I'll just sort of talk, and please feel free to interrupt me. I would really welcome that. But just to bring this to a macro level before we get into more of a micro level, the way that we have seen philanthropy trending over the years has just been amplified by 1,000 this year during COVID. And that is more money being given by less people. And so 20 years ago, people would say that 80% of campaign funding was coming from 20% of an organization's constituency. And so, hi. Hi. Sorry, I was in the middle of a sentence and I wanted to give you the chance to sign on so I can start my sentence from the beginning and not feel like I wasn't giving good context. I was just mentioning that the way philanthropy is trending has been just amplified by 1,000 during this year of COVID, and that the way that people would talk about philanthropy 20 years ago would be to say, 80% of funding is coming from 20% of the constituency involved with an organization. And then you fast forward to the last handful of years, it is more like 90% of funding coming from 5% or sometimes even less of an organization's constituency. So if we look at the disparity in wealth, it's getting greater, and that's not a political statement. It's just truly the facts in this country that people who have money are leveraging opportunities to make more money, and people who don't are suffering at that expense. And I think that COVID has shown us that when the market hits low points, people with means can just, really plow cash into the market and be patient enough to see what will happen and benefit from it. And so there's a lot of people this year, especially, who are making a lot of money. And it's important for me to give that context and even make that note specifically, because we all feel like, oh man, people are being pinched, people are losing their jobs, times feel so weird and hard. But regardless of the stress that anyone on this screen faces, there's people who have just, the stress doesn't touch their finances. And those people, if they are philanthropists, are only going to continue to be more generous. There's a lot of factors that we need to consider about this year. So the first one is what I just mentioned, which is that we've been seeing this trend along the timeline of like, hey, we're getting less donors, but we're raising more money. Yes, people are focusing their investments more. On this parallel path, but only having started more recently, businesses and corporations are saying, hey, can we jump on this bandwagon that these well-known philanthropists are on? They're investing money, they're being more focused about their giving, and they're actually learning about the impact that they're doing. Can we become a part of that? Phil and I, that's a piece of our business, is to try and make corporations and businesses give more strategically. So we're saying, yes, please do that. Let's help facilitate the process so that corporations are not spreading their money a mile wide and an inch deep, but they're actually genuinely curious about where they can have an impact, where they can generate outcomes, and knowing what their workforce cares about and uniting them around shared mission and values. So all of these great things that elevate the conversation around philanthropy are happening. I think that we need to know that there's a couple of other things at play in this fourth quarter. One of those is the fact that people have put out a lot of COVID-related appeals. It got trendy, I think, and maybe even a little bit out of hand or out of control at some point in the pandemic, with solicitations that asked for support around COVID needs, but didn't necessarily articulate what those are. We saw a lot of schools put out requests for support, only to later learn that one sophisticated philanthropist posed enough hard questions about what their endowment looked like to realize that they're not actually suffering. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's people who cross their fingers and hope for the best with a regular appeal, when really they should have indicated that 86% of their student body was receiving financial aid. They were making most of their money on room and board, like everything was spiraling for them. So I say all of this to say that if you are making a case for something specific, there's nothing more important than the details. So this generation of philanthropists that's rising, and I'll even include myself in this, love stats. We love numbers. We want to know exactly why you need something. And if we give to it, what will the outcome be? So the generation before us was really into communities. They wanted to know, like, you know, about children and about, you know, everything in more of this emotional, heartfelt way. Yes, we still want those stories, but I would like to couple that, you know, a real life story with actual statistics. And the days are gone of expecting to raise money on just saying, geez, wouldn't you love to feed these people? It would make you feel so good. And so that's one thing, is that we have to be mindful of how hungry people are for statistics and how much they want to know what you really need this year. The other thing we need to be mindful of is that people have actually changed the places that they give to. For many people, the first time in their life, or the first time in a lot of years, where they've decided to give elsewhere. I won't waste a lot of time going off on this, but if you go on my site, I wrote a blog post called Donor Trend Hyperlocal Giving. It talks about how, you know, people felt really compelled by COVID issues or social injustice issues and considered giving elsewhere. People like Charity Water, their founder and CEO, were like, hey, we still need to give clean water to kids in Africa. And donors are saying, we know you do, but we need to make sure the hospital that's 5 minutes from us has enough protective equipment to actually treat COVID patients. So you can see that kind of pull on different entities. And if you work for one that you feel like, I don't really know if I fall into this category of this tremendous, incredible, significant need right now just because of the pandemic, don't let that be shown through your communication. It's okay to have internal conversations about how you're doing or how you're not affected, how you are affected, but all of your appeals should be both always having tension between optimism, vision, future, and hey, we can't do this without you. So what I would say to the Charity Water CEO if he called me and said, Meg George, what should I do? I still need to get the water to third world countries. I would say, go to your donors and show them how many children you hydrated over the last 3 years. Show them what has happened in those countries when they don't have clean water. Show them the projections on what you think you can do with how much you anticipate to raise. If there's a gap in hydrating kids, demonstrate it on a sheet of paper with numbers, articulate it in person, get the meeting. So my point is, if you don't work for a hospital or a college that could face closing down, it's okay. You still have a case. If people gave to you year after year, they were there for a reason. They cared about you. They loved what you do or what you stand for or how you make them feel. And you can still make them feel like you have nothing but gratitude for what they've done, but that you really need them to keep doing it if they want to see you continue to survive and thrive. So normally, there's always something to be mindful of. But those two things that I just mentioned around how COVID needs have been solicited for and how some missions aren't exactly aligned with COVID, forcing people to give, to different entities, those things are particularly important this year. So last week when we were going to have this conversation, I think it was October 7th, and in my head, that meant we had about 1 month left of the year where you could actually just be reaching out to people for a meeting or a Zoom and not make an ask. But a sort of general rule of thumb would be that after the first week of November until the rest of the year, your meetings should really be asks. This is not based on like some research that we did. This is just based on us having done the job at several organizations and knowing that you can only take so many meetings every week. And in those last like 6 or 7 weeks of the year, if you're taking a meeting, you probably need to walk away with some money. So it kind of leaves you at a crossroads, right? Because some people just have not been cultivated to the extent that you feel like you could call them up and have a meeting with them and just like ask them for money. If that's the case, then what you should be doing now, like tomorrow and next week, is asking people for a meeting, keeping the email or the phone call really short and sweet and direct, but saying to them, I'd like to have a conversation with you about what your philanthropic plans are for the end of the year. Can we touch base? And if you know that this person is a real prospective donor, and you either know this because they have significant wealth capacity, they've given to you in a big way before, or you've already started the process of cultivating them, you might even say, I want to have another conversation with you about the plans we're thinking about and what you're thinking about too. And when you keep the language, somewhat direct about your hope for the conversation, if they want to do something for you before December 31st, this is their invitation to engage in that conversation with you. And I'm going to circle back to what to do in that meeting in just a moment. If they don't have a plan to do something before December 31st with you, it's still a great idea to get that meeting out of the way, for lack of better words, in October before you really need to buckle down on asks and be able to plant the seed for a solicitation in the next calendar year. It's never a waste of your time to have another cultivation meeting. You should not rush something just to do it before the end of the year. It's still going to be in your best interest to engage them in a conversation around the ideas the organization has, the visioning process you're going through, what you're thinking about and wanting to know from them what they're thinking about as you see their interests and their philanthropic goals aligning with you. So those would be some words that I would maybe use in that conversation. I would make sure that I was listening really well, but also reviewing my notes from the last conversations I had with them, so that at this meeting in October, you either set yourself up for another conversation in the next year when the timing might feel more appropriate for them, might feel like you're better prepared to align them with something. Or I might say to them, can I ask you to consider a $3,000 gift to support the beginning of the program we continue to talk about? It's not my intention to leave our conversation at that. It's my hope that that's just the start of our conversation. And if you're open to it, I'd like to pick it back up in the new year and talk about something that might feel really impactful for us. But I kind of want to give you the chance to see how we spend your money, see what the return on investment feels like for you, and to give me the chance to steward you and prove myself. So what you can do in the fourth quarter is you can ask for a test gift. That is another blog post I just wrote. I just posted it today, and so it would be the first one on my site. And I delve into a lot more details there around how you might strategize on that. But at the end of the day, you're not going to do anything wrong by asking for a meeting. And what I want to show you is that you're equipped with options. So it's in your best interest to ask someone intentionally for a conversation, because you might find that it was a cultivation meeting and you still have November and December to go back to them for a conversation. You found out a lot in October and you're glad that you went and had that conversation now. You might find that this is your only bite at the apple, and so you're going to take it by asking for a test gift. Where you fall down there is if you just say, would you consider $3,000? Thank you so much. If this is a person who can give you $25,000 or $50,000, I'm speaking relative here, so just use different numbers in your mind if these numbers don't make sense for your position. They might think, this is great, I got off the hook, she's been cultivating me for months now and telling me about the new building and the endowment they're growing, and if she's just asking me for this gift, like, I'm gonna write this check, I guess, So you really have to make sure to let them know that your hope is to start the conversation with this, because you're kind of hoping they'll test you. If they take that on, you have to do a hell of a job of proving to them that you spent their money really well, there's outcomes, they made an impact, you steward them, and you continue to remind them of that bigger vision, that more futuristic outlook, the idea that they're going to be a part of something bigger. Phil would be so hurt if I did not mention this, that every single thing that you do needs to lead with gratitude, and a lot of it. He even has gone so far to say this month that it's just been such a shit year, for excuse my French, that if you don't send somebody a note about just to say thank you so much, we couldn't have done this year without you, and you go to them for an ask, they might feel like you're grouped into the rest of the people who are asking them for money, because everyone's getting hit with so many asks and appeal. I mean, every year, but especially this year, that to separate yourself before you even dive into everything we're talking about, you should just spend the hour to write individual notes of gratitude to everybody who's on your mind. And don't be afraid to just say to them, like, everything we did this year was made possible because of you. Your generosity, your philanthropy, you made a difference. This note is just to say thank you. So that would be my advice before anything else. When you get to a conversation, whether that's by Zoom or in person, I think it's really important to just talk honestly about the idea that really sophisticated and successful business women and businessmen are not necessarily sophisticated philanthropists. It's like you have to remind yourself in these conversations, especially with people who might have a very strong personality, that you know more about it than they do. And so don't be afraid to help educate them along the way about philanthropy in general, about philanthropy at your organization, about their own personal philanthropy. And so before I make any solicitation, the two things that I don't forget to do are to educate and to recite meaningful details I've heard them say. Whether that's on this conversation I'm having right now, or things I remember from the past, or things I read in the past in their profile on my database. I want Susan to know, I heard you say that you have 2 daughters getting married in 2021, that this mission is in your top 3 philanthropic priorities, that you and your husband are bi-coastal at this point, whatever it may be. And all of that being said, you felt most moved by our aspirations to grow our endowment specifically for the new, humanities program. When I think about your philanthropy, Susan, I know that you usually write a check for one amount at one time. And what's very meaningful to you is to know that there's outcomes and that you're having an impact. And so what I'm going to ask you to consider today, I thought about for a long time. I want to be able to anticipate when you're going to support us over these next handful of years. And I want to be able to let the program director know what she can plan to do with that money. And not just that, I want to bring these finances to the board and show them that when we grow the endowment in this way, we anticipate a 4.5% spend on endowment growth. Knowing all of that, would you consider $50,000 spread over a 5-year period, a gift of $10,000 each year? So even though that was such a ginormous mouthful, what Susan just heard me say is like, wow, she listened to me 6 months ago about my daughter's weddings, even though that was in passing. And wow, she noticed that she talked to me in Los Angeles and New York. And okay, yeah, she sees that I just like to write a check and not think too far in advance. But okay, I can see how the board and the program director might want to expect that. Maybe I even also threw in the fact that she could be recognized at a higher level rather than just at the level that she gives at a one-time gift. And then I asked her. So we can't assume people know a lot about philanthropy just because they have a lot of money. That's usually actually not the case. And secondly, we can't assume that they know everything that happened in our head or in the meetings we had back at our office where we strategized around prospects and prospect movement. So if I could leave you with the most important things, it would be to be really intentional and deliberate about what you think of for an ask, and then communicate all of it before you even make the ask so that you're really bringing the person along with you. That was so much talking, and I do have more, some more things written down, but I kind of want to stop and see if you guys have any questions or on anything I just said.
I feel like you gave us so many good ideas, and I mean, so many things. I'm taking a few notes here as you were talking. And I do definitely want to open it up for other people's questions as well. And I do have a couple of my own, and I don't want to monopolize that. So does anyone have any questions before I kind of jump in all over the place here?
I have a couple, but you can, I don't care.
No, go ahead.
They're kind of scattered. So first I would say that I'm not necessarily in major gifts. Of course, they exist for the Alzheimer's Association. That's not necessarily my market. So I'm not sure how much you would say, what you just said applies to my world, which is more the Walk to End Alzheimer's. So it's walk participants and teams, as well as corporate partners, so local businesses that we're looking to secure sponsorships with. So the first, I think they kind of went together, where you were sort of discussing determining that person's capacity. So I guess, especially when you're talking about businesses, how does one go about determining what their capacity is? And I certainly have fallen into the trap that I think you were alluding to, where I was like, how about $1,000, when they probably have much more to give. So
right.
Is there a suggestion? How do you go about letting them lead, right? Because it is in a way a negotiation, and you don't want to undersell, but you also don't want to, at least I'm afraid, to seem greedy and be like, no, give me 10,000 instead of 1,000. So
yeah, so
not a question, but
no, it's a good question, and this comes up constantly. And so here's what I'll say, is that the first thing that you can do personally for yourself is listen to as many, like podcasts and just kind of confident, inspirational TED Talks as you can around sales and philanthropy. So there's like an amazing TED Talk about a person who I can't think of his name right now, but you could search it. It's about philanthropy in the nonprofit world. This gentleman stands up, this was years ago, and he's like, why the hell do we treat nonprofits and charities like they're these small weaklings, and we treat businesses like they're these amazing, powerful things, and we'll pay the CEO, $700,000 a year, and we'll pay the development person like 32. He's like, why? Like, we can't just live in this world without charities and services and nonprofits. When I watched that, it was like an epiphany for me. And I can't remember how many years ago this was, but I'm like, why am I acting like I am, taking money out of their pocket that they could be spending at Toys R Us for their kid? They're a business. Like, if we're talking about corporations, they budgeted their money for philanthropy all year. And do you want to know what it actually is? It's just a marketing budget. They're not even in the business of actually, truly, usually making a change, like transforming an institution. They're in the business of making sure that people see their names, that they can get more business, and that their workforce feels good about them giving back. So whether or not that resonates well with business owners, that's the truth about American corporations and philanthropy. What you can do is go to them and ask them, can I ask you a question? I want to do it a little bit different this year than I usually do. What's your budget for philanthropy? Oh, I don't know, $100,000. How many organizations do you spread that across? Oh, last year it looks like we did about 220. Really? What was the return like on that? What do you mean? Like, what were the outcomes?
This all sounds so intimidating for me to consider asking these kinds of questions. That's crazy.
Well,
okay.
The first time that you have a conversation that feels scary, you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But then when you leave and the person is like, why do we only give $1,000 to the Alzheimer's Association if our CEO absolutely loves it and we've done it for the past 20 years? And so I know this is not like a personal coaching session, but I think this is really important. You have to change your mindset. Like, honestly, I open every workshop that our firm runs by telling people, you are a change agent. People, like, you actually have people who are either sick or enjoying something or using something or surviving or getting like all of their mental health happiness, whatever it is, from you facilitating between a person who has money and an organization who needs it. You are a change agent. You are expected to be really sharp and emotionally intelligent and quick on your feet and also like a visionary. You're expected to be all of these things. So if you can treat yourself with the importance that your job is, you will feel like you can own the questions that you can and should ask somebody much more. And you want to know why? Because you deserve to know what their philanthropy budget is and who else they give to. And if they just love sponsoring things because it feels good to see their name places, or if it's because they really want to affect change as it relates to Alzheimer's or some other mission. So I urge you to just go into the conversation like it's a business relationship and not just like they need to do you a favor by sponsoring something for you.
Yeah.
They don't need to do that favor for you. They already have the money budgeted, and it's really just used as marketing. So if you can actually have a conversation with them about philanthropy and use that word and say to them, I'm just so curious, like, what are the missions you give to and how did you come to choose them? And what would drive you to give me more money? I mean, I've asked corporations, like, what is it that pushes you to give people a certain amount? You know what they usually say is recognition. So here's what I say to you. You have a way to give them way, way more of it than you ever could at a golf tournament right now or a gala in the past. And that's through free social media use. It's through newsletters, email blasts, Instagram, a Facebook ad, a video about their mission on LinkedIn. And what corporations are starting to realize is Nike's like, oh yeah, people do know that we make sneakers, but they don't know what kind of people we are. So if the Alzheimer's Association goes to Chobani, let's just say something we know, and you're like, we already know you sell yogurt and like we really like it, it's good yogurt, but who are you guys? Like, where do you give? Can I tell a story about you and how you came to this place in your business, or something about your team members who really love supporting Alzheimer's? So I think that if you can talk yourself into being the person you already are, which is the facilitator for change and evolution, and then go to them around a conversation that doesn't just give them a sign somewhere, but actually tells their story, they're going to have a personal connection to you. And donors, you know, like billionaire philanthropists who have signed the Giving Pledge, for instance, they all say, the thing that moves me the most is a personal connection. There's no reason why businesses and corporations can't be treated that way too.
Yeah.
Meg, I really love that perspective, and I love like thinking about the intersectionality in terms of values and like what are the values that you have as an organization, and then how can you match those with the values of a corporation, and how then can the corporation share those values with their customers, and you know, to create that sense of who are you, right? And this kind of leads into one of my questions. So I work for those who don't know, I work for Helio Health. We're a nonprofit. We help people who are recovering from substance use and mental health disorders. And one of the things that we've noticed a lot with our corporate partners is this move towards more of a partnership. So it's not just that businesses are sponsoring our events, it's that they want to get involved. They want to find volunteer opportunities for their employees to be a part of the organization. You know, they really want to partner with us and focus, as you mentioned, Meg, all of their resources on making more of a significant difference as opposed to spreading it out. So one of the things that I was wondering is, you know, in your work that you do with different organizations and different corporations, what are things that nonprofits can do to add value to those relationships? So what can we bring to the table for the corporations to be like, hey, you're doing all of this great stuff for us, here's what we can do for you?
Yeah, I think my answer is probably going to sound a little bit redundant, although the way you pose the question is really fascinating. I would still just kind of echo my sentiments around telling their story. And so a lot of corporations and businesses have a very different audience than Helio Health or other nonprofit organizations have. And so there's oftentimes a perception that people are just subscribed to a company newsletter or follow a company on Instagram because they really like their product. And companies don't always toot their own horn. I think sometimes it's out of like a fear of perception, and sometimes it's out of just like living within themselves and not realizing an outside perspective. on what they do well. And I think that if you're going to go to a corporation or a business about the idea of actually partnering, you need to do your homework before you go, so that when you launch in a conversation, you can say, Doug, you've owned the same business for 20 years. And what I found online is that you do have, like, you know, it pulls on your heartstrings to care for vulnerable people, but we never know who or what or where. And a lot of business owners will say, well, I don't want to broadcast it. I don't want to look like I'm bragging. And I think that's where you say, like, but what we do is we take the money you give us and we affect change. And so can we just come up with a solution on telling that story and including the parts you are comfortable with sharing? And we might even urge you to go out of your comfort zone a little bit, so that our supporters, the people who follow us, the people who care about Helio Health, actually know the story behind the money that's coming to us. And it's a little selfish, but it actually does two things for you. When you go to a person and you say, brag, like, tell the story, show people that you affect change, let us be the ones who tell your story. We can videotape a conversation you're having with your workforce about where you gave. We could interview like 5 people in your workforce and ask them what they care about, knowing like where we work. We could post it on our social media. We could tell a story about how you involved your kids in giving this year. The opportunities are just absolutely endless. But when you post that story, when a nonprofit actually takes a corporate partner out of just a sponsor at, you know, like I said, a golf tournament, and puts it on their social media in this, like, whoa, meaningful, emotional, heartfelt way, you're showing people that you have a culture of philanthropy, and that people know when they give to you that you spend their money well, and that there's a return on that investment, and that people are so proud of that return that they're even willing to tell their story. So it only benefits you so much more than just a standard sponsorship at an event could do when you bring it to this level, because it's like all of a sudden you've opened up people's eyes to, I see what Helio Health does, and now I see why they're able to do it, you know?
And I feel like that's kind of one of the silver linings of the pandemic and social distancing, is that it's forcing people to be creative with those relationships. You know, we're not doing the events, and, you know, for us at Helio, that's such a great example. We were supposed to have our 100th anniversary gala this year. Right. Of course, we couldn't have that, unfortunately, but what we ended up doing was just creating this digital campaign and asking a lot of those sponsors, would you be a founding member of this campaign? And then this is how we plan to recognize you, doing videos, having those conversations, and really looking at that partnership, as opposed to just, hey, we're going to throw your ad in the program and, you know, put you on our welcome sign.
Right. I think bravo to you guys for doing that. And I think that's just the way of the world. I mean, I know that this sounds kind of gloom and doom, but I don't think events will ever be the same again. And I think that people who are just kind of like holding on to the side of their boat and riding out the storm, the waves, are going to feel disappointed that they weren't pivoting a little bit in this year as it relates to that more major gift mentality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I'll keep going. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so, you know, thinking about major gifts and the conversations that you're having with your donors, one of the things that you said before that really kind of stopped me was this idea on statistics versus stories. Because I feel like for the longest time, that the push has been tell your story, tell your story, tell your story, right? And like, yes, statistics are good and important and supporting, but it's like, you know, how can you tell that story? How can you connect with someone on an emotional level? And now you're saying, yes, that's important, but. So Can you just speak a little bit more to that? I'm seeing like other people nod their heads too, so I'm glad I wasn't the only one that was like, wait, what?
I know, well, like, how can we keep up? It's like we have a kid who's like 11, and everyone always has cooler sneakers than him, and every time I turn around I'm like, well, how is there more sneakers available? Like, keep up with all of these sneakers. So I'm doing a lot of research right now. I'm hopeful to present it in the form of a book, but who knows how long that's going to take. But my research is around interviewing philanthropists from the next generation. So ages, let's say right now it's roughly like 25 to young 50s. And what I'm asking them, and I'll share what they're already saying to you, is that they don't care about being seen. It's not important to them that other people see them at places. It's much more important to them to feel like they're actually a part of something. And what they want to know is not what you have as far as your organization's story goes right now and what you feel like might be a good pitch to make somebody give, but they want to know what the organization's overall vision is in like the life of the organization, and they want to know exactly why you would need their money right now. So if I know those two things, and I do, because it's what I've started to see in campaigns over the last couple of years, but it's what I'm hearing straight from people who have family foundations, then as an organization, I want to convey that I'm in a strategic visioning process with my board and my leadership team, and we hope in the next 5 years we're going to do A and B, and we hope in the next 10 and 15 years we're going to do C and D. And it might be a little bold and it might be a little aspirational, but I'm telling it to you because if I stay on the path I'm on, I think it feels achievable. And so they really like this idea of things being achievable, but being a little bit more bold and aspirational than you might expect in the past. And so that's really important for everyone to know, because colleges and private schools are not going to get away anymore with doing a strategic plan that says things like this. We'd really like to create an atmosphere that fosters students. The advancement office is like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, how am I supposed to pitch this? So basically, if the strategic visioning process doesn't point to something that's like a little bit visionary, a little bit bold, like a little bit of a goal and fundable at the same time, then, you're going to be coming on the back, finding yourself in a really hard position to actually solicit major gifts. So we know all of those big picture things. Okay, well, it's October 14th and I need to ask for money on November 14th. So what do I need to know right now? What you need to know right now is that people feel like for years they're opening a letter and it's like, oh, how many times do I have to unfold it? I'm never going to read this whole thing. Where does my eye go? If there's an indentation that has 4 bullet points, that's pretty much what I'm going to read. So just human nature at this point, with constant screens in front of us, people doing business on an iPhone and reading letters and appeals on screens that are this big, spending the rest of their night, doing things on Zoom or Netflix. It's like our capacity to actually pay attention to some kind of story and emotional pull, and to be honest, even to get into the feelings of empathy, like when I read a case right now that's like, wouldn't you feel horrible if this was you? It's like, yeah, but I would feel horrible about a lot of things. Like, tell me what's really happening here. I need the numbers to know what I can do and why. So the best appeals get right to the point. They say, Meg, our organization exists to do this, and we've done it for this many years, and we've served 2,500 children. This year, boom, boom, boom. Next year, here's what we're anticipating, here's what we're envisioning, here's our plans, and that's why we need boom and boom. The next sheet tells a story about Justin, one of the guests that we served last year, who's now, in this photo with his mother, and I hope you really enjoy his story, Best John. So the next generation of philanthropists loves hearing about a real life outcome and like an actual thing that's happened at your organization, but they're really giving if they think that their money is going to have an outcome associated with it.
Interesting. I think that's really interesting and really important, and I think it definitely kind of changes the way that a lot of us will approach some of those conversations, is moving away from that feel good, that story, that emotional piece, and making sure that we have that data to back it up, and that we have, you know, thought about that and really thought through what we're doing and where we're trying to go and how the donor is going to help us get there. Kind of one of the other statistics that you mentioned today, and I'm going way back to when you first started, just because I think it's really interesting, is that 90% of funding is coming from 5% of donors, right? And, you know, I think intrinsically you know that, but to hear the numbers like that, it really, again, stops you and makes you think, okay, what should I be, like, how can I use this to do a better job, right? So, you know, knowing that there are folks on this call from many different organizations, many different development departments, you know, at different stages, what would you say in terms of making that transition to major gifts, especially in a COVID world? What are some of the most important things, maybe like the top 3, top 5 things that we can be doing right now to set ourselves up for that kind of statistic and that kind of expectation from donors moving forward?
Yeah, you can, I mean, the best time to start is right now on getting a handle on who your actual top major gift prospects are. So I'll use terms that probably will feel comfortable in Central New York. A leadership gift is like $1,000 a year. A major gift would be more in that $5,000 to $10,000 a year area, meaning that if someone makes a commitment for $5,000 over 5 years, they're probably a leadership type donor. That would be the term I would use. But if someone can make a $25,000 commitment or more, they're a major gift prospect or donor. The number one thing you can do right now is organize your prospects in descending order of 2 things, and both are very important: lifetime or cumulative giving and wealth capacity. And I don't just mean, you know, the DonorScape rating that they give you where they say A is a good prospect and B is a little bit less of a good prospect, we'll put them in order for you. No, I want you to rate your prospects. I want you to spend the money to screen your prospects, which is really not that much money. And then I want you to give me the report, DonorScape or whatever net wealth tool, and I want to open up the spreadsheet and look at those fields for myself, because I'm not going to take your word for it that John Mezzalingua is B because his political contributions were lower in 2019 than you would expect. I want to see how much that guy is worth, like his net worth, and then I want to put that into my equation or my calculation when I'm organizing my prospects. So in whatever capacity you have the ability to actually make a prospect list, a portfolio that includes fields, detailed fields about what people gave in the past and how much potential they have, and maybe a note on their affinity, you know, why do you consider them your prospect? You put those guys in descending order, you start at the top of the list, and you find a strategy to have a conversation with them, and you don't stop until you are securing meetings and conversations and engaging board members in your leadership around those people. And so when we think about the pyramid, a lot of us are doing a few different things, but very few of us are taking that very top of the pyramid and focusing most of our time, and that's what you need to do. And so if the next campaign that you run, you know that that very tip, that very 5% will fund 90% of your initiative, you have to be consistently and systematically spending your time with them. Now, someone said to me last week, and it was smart, what about all those people in the middle? When you go to call them in 5 years, you know, let's just anticipate that they'll be at their higher earning years. They're going to say, well, I haven't heard from you. You know, why am I hearing from you now? And to that, I say, that's why you leverage the use of free social media and email blasts and more broad-based communication. That's why when someone responds to your appeal with $200 or $300 as opposed to the 25 that most people give, you write them a handwritten thank you note and you leave them a voicemail saying, thank you so much. You know, tell them the truth. Like, I send this appeal out to a lot of people, and I saw your gift come in and I had to pick up the phone and just say thank you. So if you can be coupling awareness down here, and exposure down here with participation in the middle and actual cultivation and solicitation in the top, then you should have a natural funnel up to the top of the pyramid. And being intentional about how you treat all three of those different prospect groups is really important to actually being like campaign ready or in a major gift program.
I love those three layers: the awareness, the participation, and the cultivation. I feel like it's just a really easy way to understand how you should be working those relationships.
Yeah,
so that is awesome.
Okay.
So awesome. All right, guys. So recognizing that it is 6 o'clock and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, does anyone have any other final questions for Meg? Any thoughts? Anything you want to bring up, brainstorm, toss around? I love this group because there's so many like creative, great ideas. And sometimes even if I have an unrelated question, throwing it out to other fundraisers is just a great way to get thoughts and work through things. So just going to put it out there, guys, one more time.
I would just say thanks. I think it was cool for me. I'm relatively new. I've only been with the Alzheimer's Association for a year, still working on, as clearly it was indicated, building my own, building my chops and my comfortability in being able to do this. But it was nice to hear not only new things, but also a little bit of validation along the way that some of the things that we're doing are the right thing. I spent my first hour and a half today writing handwritten thank you notes to all of our sponsors, you know, like, so I was like, hey, I did one thing right.
Oh, please. That's always a good use of your time. And I'll tell you something, in development, a lot of people start in different jobs, but some of those are events or annual fund. They all have different titles, but some years down the road, everyone will have to be a gift officer in some capacity. So there's no better time than now to start just, you know, kind of having an awareness and starting to hone your skill a little bit. So you're doing a great job, and don't feel intimidated too much by asking questions, because that is a big part of your job. And like I said, it's what you deserve to know. So you're doing well.
I appreciate it.
Meg, thank you so much. I have so many questions yet, but I really appreciate your time today. And my big question for another time would be, how do you enlist board members in this cultivation process of that top 5%? But that's a whole other conversation, I think, in terms of building a major gifts program.
Yeah, no, I know people have to go to their families and eat dinner, but really quickly, because I won't sleep at night if I don't respond to this. It's such a good question, and I think that boards feel like they're being misused, or, you know, people in leadership positions feel like they're misusing their board. And something I want to say is, boards are really meant to help us be those visionaries and help us speak with one voice about where the organization is headed. They're also meant to open the door. And so board members will say, oh God, I don't want to join the board in the middle of a campaign. I hate asking for money. And I always say, good, don't. I'll do that part. But here's the 3 people I would like to meet. Can you make the introduction for me? And so I think if you get organized, then you go to your board and you say, hey, we're not going to bite off more than we can chew, but here's 15 names. Can we spend an hour talking about who knows who, what their circumstances might be? Let's all leave here with 1 or 2, that's it, assignments on opening the door for me. You can join me if you want to. We can meet beforehand to talk about who will say what, or you can open the door and I'll walk through it. But I think if you're really direct and you give them a very short and sweet assignment, they will actually do 1 or 2 things. They won't do 10, and they will botch and ask. So I think making them know that you will do the work, but you need them to help get you in front of the person is the best start.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Lynn, that was a great question. And I made a note that I think it should be a topic for a future happy hour.
If we're allowed to add questions to the pile, it's kind of way off topic, but it came up when I was listening to part of what Meg was discussing. Is there an approach to lapsed donors, especially this year where I think I heard you allude to the fact, right, that a lot of people focused their philanthropy efforts this year towards COVID. So they might have gone that route and sort of disappeared from us this year. And how do we go about, what is the best approach to getting them back the next year? Here's hoping they just want to come back on their own, but we can't guarantee that, and we can't plan for that.
Yeah, it's not, I would say don't anticipate people coming back on their own this year,
No.
but I think that you need to go back to the year that they gave, and then you need to send them a letter. Like if you're missing like LIBON, SIBONs, whatever it is, you need to actually segment your letter so that you're giving them the stats on the year that they gave to you, so that you can say, here's what happened in 2018 when you were a part of our philanthropic efforts and success. Here's what happened as a result of that. And in 2021, here's what we're hoping to do. We can't do it without you. 2018 was only possible because of you and the other people who joined you to do it. We'd love to have you back to make 2021 goals possible.
Solid. I like that.
Chris, did I cut you off from something that you were starting to say? Okay.
I was just going to say hi and thank you for the session here today, and thank you actually for leading it. If we had time, and we probably don't, I was just going to solicit the group for advice for people starting as a philanthropy director recently. That's all. But that could be a topic for your next session there. You know, getting started as a development director type person.
That's really actually the best idea for a session, because more people are entering the field, and in such a weird time that I don't know if Faye can hear us, but Ashley, you can hear us. That would be a really good session for somebody. Yeah.
I have my list here. Guys, I probably can't see it because of the lighting, but I have my list here. So
I work with Chris, and so we get the chance to talk individually. And he's in a new role at Elmcrest. That's a client of ours, but actually just for anybody, I would say that if we know where philanthropy is trending and we know what's already happened, and COVID was like, if you thought you were going to do your events, I'm showing you that they really aren't sustainable. The best thing you can do at the onset is set the culture and the pace for the leadership and the board to show them that you will be spending most of your time on major gift relationships, that you can't afford to not spend money on getting organized there and actually having meetings and making sure you have your talking points. And so one like simple tip is to have meetings, and then like every other Friday send contact reports to a core group of maybe board leadership and internal leadership to constantly be showing them that you're part of the visionary process, you're interfacing with people who can really make a difference, and that you are kind of facilitating the change that they all want to see happen, because you're really slowly working towards that funding for it. So set it up front that you won't just be at events and doing appeals in your office all the time. You'll be out there, you know.
love it.
Thank
Love
you.
it. Chris, welcome to the field. I hope that we see you at more AFP events soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, guys, any other questions before we wrap up for the day?
It's a little repetitive, but I did do a Phil and I, so you could hear some of his perspective, did a podcast on the development debrief. She is a major gift officer at Columbia. All of her episodes are just incredibly fascinating with really interesting thought leaders. But the episode that Phil and I did aired today, and some of it is redundant to what we talked about today, but it always exists on your phone. So sometimes if you kind of want a reminder on some of these things, you could go listen to that too.
Absolutely. And Meg, just for reference, you had talked about some blog posts that you had done recently that I thought sounded really interesting. Are they just on your website if we want to check them out?
Yeah, so just georgedevgroup.com. You can click on blogs, and I post one every 3 or 4 weeks on all kinds of major gift topics. So, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like this has been an hour very well spent, and we really appreciate you rescheduling with us to make this happen.
Yeah, I'm sad that we missed all of our friends we had last week, but if you see them, then let them know this is recorded, and thank you for asking me. This was really fun.
Awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope everyone has a great night. Hopefully we will see you. We have a luncheon in 2 weeks. Oh, next week. Oh my gosh, we're mid-October. We have a luncheon next week on ethics, and then we are in the development phases of a happy hour for November as well. So we will keep you posted.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Bye.